Okay, I think we'll get started, and I'll just let people in as we go along. First of all, I just want to reiterate for anyone who's just joined us, our gratitude to you for taking time tonight to join us for this webinar. I have no doubt that you're going to absolutely thoroughly enjoy it, and we're very lucky with the wonderful speakers that we've got. Sorry, I'm just trying to juggle a few things here. I've just got 2 more people to let in. There we go. Wow, it's a really good turnout. So I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, as well as to emerging leaders. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I also thank the traditional custodians for caring for country for thousands of generations. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sovereignty was never ceded. This content always was and always will be Aboriginal land. If you have any questions or comments about this evening's presentations, can you put them in the chat box, please? And we'll get to them once all presentations are completed. Thanks. So our first speaker this evening is the very amazing Animal Liberations Campaign Manager, Lisa Ryan, who will present on the recent New South Wales review of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, POCTAA Regulations 2025. Thank you, Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with the other presenters, Rachel Smith and Lisa White, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing their presentations. We are going to start with just having a bit of trouble moving my screen.
What are you trying to do, Lisa?
Trying to move my slides across, and it's
so if you go over to the side, see how you've got the blue dot? If you go over to the other side.
I think
when the little arrow comes up, that should work.
Yeah, no, the arrow's not coming up. It's coming up to the left. Okay, it's going to go. I have to go right to the back. I must have had it on the last slide. Apologies, people. I have got a number of slides to go through tonight, and just want to reiterate the offer that we always make from Animal Liberation, that if there are advocates or activists out there who can benefit from using some of the information in our slides, please sing out. We're very, very happy to share. Tonight's presentation, I've got a lot of slides, so I'm going to be ripping through them fairly quickly so that we can stay on track. So if the slides, and we do record these webinars, so you'll be able to watch it again if you need to, but if anybody can benefit from using the slides from Animal Liberation, please send us an email, and we're very happy to make those available to people that are going to use them in the right manner. So tonight I'm going to be covering the recent review of the New South Wales Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act regulation review, basically to give you an understanding of what's happened, why it's happened, and some of our background work on this. So we've split the presentation into 3. So a basic understanding of the animal welfare legislation in New South Wales, And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the recent review of the POCTAA regulations 2025. And then we're going to go into what you can do to help. So starting with the overview, just to reinforce for people that in New South Wales, the primary animal welfare and protection legislation we have is the Act. So that's the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And from that, everything else sits in underneath. But this legislation is actually reactive legislation rather than proactive. And what I mean by that is the legislation kicks in, for example, when there's been a complaint about animal neglect or animal cruelty. So that's why we're saying it's reactive rather than proactive. It's important to understand that, and this is from a very independent survey that was actually commissioned by the federal government back in 2018 from memory. So 95% of Australians want stronger protections, and 22% of Australians aren't trusting what the government is doing, either at Commonwealth level or state and territory level, in terms of protecting animals and their response to enforcement. So the way legislation works, and this is pretty much the same in all states and territories, we have the statutes, so that's the acts, like the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. Under that sits the regulations. The regulations are really the going or the doing documents about how things are supposed to happen. And then under all of that sits the mandatory codes of practice, and then we have the voluntary codes of practice. And that's pretty much the way it's set up at Commonwealth level and across other states and territories. So this will give you an understanding of the mandatory codes of practice in New South Wales, and we've got lots. Important to say that most of them are really old. The majority of them are completely inadequate. But it's these codes of practice that the regulators or the animal welfare agencies such as RSPCA or Animal Welfare League or the New South Wales Police rely on. These are some of the voluntary codes of practice in New South Wales. So we have both. So you can see pigs and camels, and you'll all be aware of the big camel campaign we've been running for nearly 12 months now. Just going back to the mandatory codes of practice, there's some really important ones in here, and I am going to be talking about a couple of them, including the code of practice for rodeo events, and I'm going to mention the code of practice for dog and cat breeding in New South Wales too. So just jumping ahead, I'm going to give you an example by using a campaign that we've been working on for several years now, and that relates to the Moruya Rodeo, which sits under the Eurobodalla Shire Council. So going back a couple of years ago now, an opportunity came up where the 5-year rodeo license was being renewed. We ran a direct action. Well over 1,000 of our supporters lodged submissions saying this license should not be renewed for another 5 years. We weren't successful in that, but we put up a really good show. And in that same year, we filmed the Moruya Rodeo and documented over it was a grueling exercise for our team that filmed it. It was about 10 hours solid filming, right up until about 5 minutes to midnight, and we were able to document what we believed were animal cruelty breaches under the code of practice. When Eurobodalla Shire Council rubber stamped, again, as they'd been doing for nearly 50 years, the rodeo license, we pushed them, and we did get a little bit of a win that they had to include in the license animal welfare had some recognition, and that the people that ran the license, ran the rodeo, had to adhere to the code of practice for rodeos in New South Wales. Now, that was good in that it got mentioned. It wasn't good in that this license is probably one of the worst codes of practice we have in New South Wales. It's now 38 years old. And even though it says on the actual code of practice it's supposed to be reviewed every 2 years, it has never been reviewed in 38 years. So that's sort of the standard of codes of practice, and why we continually fight government and the authorities to say the codes of practice aren't working and they all need to be revised. But with Maruya, when we documented the cruelty, we lodged formal complaints with RSPCA New South Wales. We then lodged a formal GIPA, which is a Freedom of Information application in New South Wales. And we were able to then go back to council and say, the rodeo operators at Maruya have been penalised for 2 very serious breaches of animal cruelty under the code of practice, understanding that the bar was as low as you can go and they still managed to breach it. But that's probably, I think it's the only time in New South Wales we've had evidence where a rodeo operator has actually been penalised. Some of you will be aware we went back to the New Year's Day Maruya rodeo this year, and we've again filmed it. We've again lodged complaints with RSPCA New South Wales. We have released one bit of footage about a horse that crashed to the ground quite violently 3 times. And the last time it crashes to the ground, it's down for a long period of time, and we actually thought it was dead. We thought it had been killed. We have another 8 hours of footage to release. So the Maruya Rodeo for us as a campaign and rodeos in general is certainly going to continue. So recently, before Christmas, our New South Wales Minister for Agriculture, Tara Moriarty, announced literally a couple of weeks before Christmas that they were going to review the POCTAA regulations. And the reason they were reviewing them was because the regulations were due to expire early February, so this February. Now, they had known those regulations were due to expire for a long time. Everybody knows when these things are going to run out, but they left it till the last minute. Our view is that that was done quite deliberately because people would be, taking holidays and busy with Christmas preparations, and nobody would know what was going on and they wouldn't get a lot of feedback. So the subs closed. They were open for 4 weeks, but you can see they closed literally a week before Christmas. We immediately lodged formal complaints with the minister about the timing of this critical review for animal welfare and protection legislation. And we also lodged complaints with a number of other government ministers and departments about what we viewed as being a very dodgy process, to put it politely. My colleague, Alex Vince, did a lot of the pushback with government on the complaints we lodged. And on the right of the screen, this is a reply we received from the minister, which if you ask for a copy of our slides or if you want a copy of this letter, very happy to share it. It's from our perspective, it's a public letter. Basically, it was a polite letter, but it was a deflective letter that they had done no wrong. We believe they did do wrong. So this is a zoom in on one of the paragraphs of that letter that my colleague Alex received, confirming that the RIS document, and the RIS stands for Regulatory Impact Statement. So that was the statement that people could read and consider before lodging submissions to what they want to change with the POCTAA regulations. Our complaint was that for 90% of the public exhibition period, that the document was unsearchable, and it was a very long and very complex document, so it was quite unwieldy. Even Alex and I, and we're quite experienced with these sort of government documents, found it really difficult to navigate. But Miss Moriarty, the Minister for Agriculture / Animal Welfare, said, yep, we've fixed everything up, and, you know, you shouldn't have any problems. But we did. So again, subs opened on the 25th of November. They closed on the 19th of December. So in terms of the documents we were complaining about being unsearchable, you can see there from the two calendars how the period where people couldn't make searches in the document. And then we had a weekend period in between. So basically what it meant was when they fixed the error that we brought to their attention, there was actually only 3 days people could adequately access the document. So that's an example of a lot of the work we do in the background. It's not just posting things on social media or on our website or getting media generated for animals and raising awareness. It's probably 50% of our time is in the background doing advocacy work and lobbying work. So basically it was 3 days that so 90% of the public consultation period, people couldn't access the document properly. So in terms of the actual regulation review, we are, as I'm sure most animal rights organisations and animal welfare organisations are, pretty shattered by the results of this review, because it's going to be a long time coming before we get the opportunity for another review. We still don't know how many submissions were actually made by the members of the public or by other advocacy organisations. But basically New South Wales, who has by far the largest amount of hens trapped in battery cages, there is still no phase out timeline, even though the other states are moving forward, not fast enough, but at least they're moving forward. New South Wales has not come up with a timeline to get these poor hens out of cages. So we currently have more than 2 million hens trapped in these cages, and by far the largest state. That's an example of where we are in comparison to other states and territories with the number of hens trapped in these dreadful cages. Another example is farm animals, which by far and large represent the largest number of animals that are exploited and abused and killed by humans. So all animal cruelty, all exploitation is bad, but nobody can dispute that our farm animals, because they are raised for human consumption or for their skins or feathers or leather, are by and large, we're talking about billions of animals here with farm animals. So in terms of pigs, like this pig with the badly notched ears, they do that deliberately in intensive piggeries as a form of identification. There is no phase out timeline for cutting off their tails, cutting out chunks of their ears, or cutting their teeth, none of which are done with any pain relief. And it's not mandatory. It's an exempted practice for those that are breeding and raising and sending to slaughter around 5 million pigs in Australia every year. In terms of, and this was the no change that probably concerned me the most because of our work with rodeo events, which are violent and brutal, was absolutely no change for what happens in rodeo events. And rodeo events are expanding at the moment. You have your classic rodeos where they have what they used to call calf roping is now called rope and tie, your bull riding, your bronc riding. So that's people either on saddles or bareback on horses making them buck, and all sorts of other horrible cruelty. We actually stopped a bucking donkeys event last year. So they continue to come up with new and varied forms of exploitation for a whole range of animals. To our horror, there are some people that are now breeding mini bulls so that more children can participate in these events. But rodeos, which is an exempted form of cruelty under the regulations, has not changed at all. So what happens to animals in rodeo events, and that image of that steer was from the Maruya Rodeo when we filmed it back in 2023. And this poor steer had, and this is part of what they do, had a rope tied around their horns, a rope tied around their rear leg between two horses and two men on the horses. And you're almost waiting for that poor animal to be ripped in half. This is standard practice and activity in rodeos in New South Wales, and we have lots of them in New South Wales. But there's no change. They have known about the cruelty. They know about the complaints. They know that nobody goes to these events to monitor them, apart from organisations like Animal Liberation and organisations like Animal Kind in Queensland are regularly filming rodeo events. But it's expensive to get somebody to go out and film for 8 or 10 hours. And I can tell you it is, because I've done it, it is really gut-wrenching work to have to sit there very close, watching these animals bellowing, their white eyes, the drooling, which are all very clear signs of stress. But our rodeos continue to be exempted. And what that means by exempted is if this same treatment was done to an animal outside of a rodeo, so a farmer doing this in a paddock, they would be prosecuted for animal cruelty. Because it's under the banner of an exempted event, they can basically do what they want. And the only way we get action is when we film it and we lodge formal complaints. So one of the other things that struck us as misleading for the New South Wales public is there were some posts about we should celebrate glue traps have been banned. Well, they actually haven't been banned. They've been banned for some animals, but they haven't been banned for insects. And these glue traps, there is, and we checked this yesterday, there is nothing in the new laws about banning glue traps to say they're going to take them off the shelves of Coles or Woolies or other stock lists. So anybody can go in and buy them. And again, there's nobody regulating it. So anybody who thinks glue traps have been totally banned, they haven't. Basically, there are still lots and lots of animals, and there's no monitoring either. Just want to go into a couple of very quick case studies. Some of you will recall back in 2012, the exposure of Wally's piggery, which was an illegal piggery. So nobody knew, there was no development application, no approval. And this guy, Wally, was operating a piggery just outside of Murrumbateman, close to Canberra. And there'd been people hearing pigs scream for a long period of time. Activists recorded what was going on in there. And I got to tell you, out of all the bad piggery stuff I've seen, Wally's was probably the worst. These pigs, to kill them, were being sledgehammered to death. That's how they were being killed. And then he was selling meat on the premises, highly illegal. Now, the upshot of the footage that was provided to the animal welfare agencies charged with being able to prosecute was they took a year and a bit to examine all the evidence. They went in and got their own. They laid something like, I think it was about 48 animal cruelty charges, and then there were an additional 12 aggravated cruelty charges, which are the most serious. Then and I remember this date clearly because it was my birthday, the 17th of November 2014, the charges were dropped. And this guy got away with how he had treated the pigs. Now, the piggery was shut down, but this guy got off scot-free. So that's an example of even where we have an act, regulations, they're not working. Now, had this been dogs, he probably would have been charged and the charges wouldn't have been dropped. But because they were pigs, it was, it didn't sort of matter. In the case of Maruya, and I mentioned this briefly before, we did get penalties. We believe the first penalties ever applied to a rodeo organisation for failing to provide vet care to a steer that had one of its horns shattered because it got caught in the chute, so those metal boxes that the animals are in until they jab them and twist their ears and then let them out to be bucking. And this poor steer, the horn was shattered to the skull and it was hanging on literally by a thread. And that poor steer was given no vet treatment, no pain relief, and was loaded onto a truck. It was only that we caught the incident in our footage, and there were 2 RSPCA inspectors there. There was a vet there. They all missed it. The only thing that got these penalties applied was our footage. This is an example of, at the time we were running our campaign against Maruya Rodeo, I was called ignorant, we were called emotional activists. That's par for the course with the type of work we do, and a lot of you out there would know that. But again, we were up against an ineffective code of practice that wasn't supporting the animals or what we were trying to do. The last case I want to talk about, because this is really recent and this is one we did a lot of work on, is a Greyhound Racing New South Wales participant by the name of Colin Wasson, who is featured there. He arranged for somebody else to kill 4 of his greyhounds, 2 at a time. The greyhounds, he was suspended for life, as was absolutely appropriate by GWIC, but it took us pushing GWIC, who is the regulator of greyhound welfare in New South Wales, that we pay for, the public pay for. It took an awful lot of pushing, I can tell you, for me to say to them and them to eventually agree that they have the same powers as RSPCA, the New South Wales Police, and Animal Welfare League to prosecute somebody for cruelty or aggravated cruelty under POCTAA. They did do that. It went to court in last October. He pleaded guilty. The sentencing happened 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago. He got a very lenient sentence, but what came out in the court case is the 4 greyhounds, and we only have names for 3 of these beautiful dogs, were shot, and then the person who shot them threw them in the Murrumbidgee River. So we are again pushing both GWIC, and we've also referred it to RSPCA to say the person who shot them needs to be investigated as well, because I have no doubt these dogs were shot in front of each other. That is also a breach of our Animal Cruelty Act. So again, we have the Act, we have the regulations. They are not protecting vulnerable animals, and particularly in instances where you have self-regulated or quasi-regulated industries like the greyhound racing industry, the horse racing industry, and every industry to do with billions of farmed animals across New South Wales. So that's just part of the headlines. It was the story that came out after this that confirmed they were shot and they were then thrown into the Murrumbidgee River. My concerns with GWIC are they haven't even referred this to the EPA about polluting a major river in New South Wales that flows into water catchment, drinking catchment. Just finishing up, and I'm sorry I've had to run through things, but I need to stay on time out of respect for other speakers. Things you can do to help us in our lobbying for better laws for all animals, and we don't discriminate. It's all animals. They are sentient to us, and they're all important. They all have rights. They all have entitlements. They all have feelings. They all have needs. So you can sign our petition to establish an independent Office of Animal Welfare. And just on that, it's important to mention, because this has happened in the last couple of days, the Men's Labor minority, and I say that with emphasis, government in New South Wales, made an election promise that we would get an independent Office of Animal Welfare. We still haven't seen a whisper from the Minister, Tara Moriarty, or the Premier, Chris Minns. However, in the same period that they've been in office, they have established a dairy consultative committee that are being paid by public money. And in the last couple of days, they have appointed the first ever New South Wales Commissioner for Agriculture. Now, this is a big deal because this is actually a statutory role. So New South Wales Labor, with their buddies, the Liberal National Party, had to pass legislation to create this statutory role. And I have no doubt the new commissioner is experienced, probably a nice person, but the person they've appointed is somebody who's had 20 years as a livestock farmer. So that will give you an idea, and they're going to be overseeing agriculture. So that will give you an idea of what we're up against and why Animal Lib, without fear or favour, is a fighter. We are very much about animal rights, and we try and cut through this red tape and this rubbish that the community and the public continue to be fed, and that's why we push so hard. That's why it's no holds barred with a lot of our posts and a lot of the actions we take, and we make no apologies for that. The other thing you can do is phone or email the New South Wales Minister and say, hey, these regulations are no good. They're actually not going to protect animals and they're quite misleading. You need to start again. That will help. Public pressure helps. You can also contact whoever you have as your local New South Wales MP, because creating the pressure at that level and then pushing up to the ministers and then up to the Premier absolutely helps. And that's why I say again, if our slides help you to create an email or have a conversation with the minister, with your local community, with your local state MP, we are very happy to share. That's it for me. I'm a little bit over, Linda, apologies. But any questions you have, put them in the chat or email us at Animal Lib. Very happy to talk to people about any of this or any of the work we do. And thank you very much for being here and for your attention.
Thank you, Lisa, for another stunning presentation. And in the chat box, it looks like people are signing as we're speaking, which is fantastic.